Fela Kuti here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Our guest, Steve Kretzman, Executive Director of Oil Change International. He's just back from London, the Shell shareholder meeting. Han Shun in studio with us, coordinator of Shell Guilty Campaign. I want to go to a short clip from a video that Han Shun, you produced to publicize the upcoming trial. It's called The Case Against Shell. Shell made a motion to pull the video off the Wiwa versus Shell website, wiwashell.org. This clip features Ken Saro-Wiwa's son, Ken Wiwa, and Marco Simmons, the legal director of Earthrights International.
Ultimately, Shell's lawyers conspired with the prosecution of the Ogoni leadership and participated in bribing witnesses against the Ogoni Nine and securing their convictions. And of course, they were ultimately executed.
The Nigerian military announced this week that my father and 8 others have been sentenced to death. They have no right of appeal.
On November 10th, 1995, after a trial universally condemned as a sham and a sentence met with shock and outrage around the world, Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogoni leaders were hanged by the Nigerian military government. Ken's last words were, "Lord, take my soul," but the struggle continues.
I urge all of you here to keep the pressure on Shell to accept the responsibility for what has happened in Ogoni and what is still happening.
That last voice, that of Ken Wiwa, Ken Saro-Wiwa's son, and before that, Marco Simmons, legal director at Earthrights International. Han Shun, explain what happened with this video?
Well, I was working with Earthrights International for several months before resigning, basically, to work on this Shell Guilty campaign, and obviously we're not coordinating with the litigation team. It was something that I was involved in before I joined the Shell Guilty campaign, and I helped produce that video. But basically, we learned about this because I've just been following along with court documents that are publicly available on the United States District Court website, and saw that Shell had been complaining about some of the education and outreach activities that the litigation team is doing. And there was an order that was noted on the website, and I was able to look at a document where they had opposed one of the lawyers' participation in the trial because he had a link to the video on his firm's website, and subsequently the court ordered them to remove the website after multiple requests from Shell. So it is the video that Shell does not want the public to see, but of course, you know, it's the internet. It's been on the website. It's been out there. It's on YouTube. So they have removed it from the website, but it's still out there. And obviously, it's something it contains dangerous truths that we hope people will watch and learn from.
This Shell Guilty campaign that you're coordinating, explain what you're doing.
Well, basically, as I said, I left working with Earthrights because their involvement in the litigation, along with co-counsel Center for Constitutional Rights, it constrains them from doing all kinds of things. Understandably, there are certain things that they can't say and can't do because their focus is on litigation and in the courtroom. But we felt that it was important that we keep a spotlight on Shell, on this trial, and make sure that people know, that people like yourself who followed this 14 years ago, there are an awful lot of people who don't even realize that this is coming to court. There are profound implications. So we organized Shell Guilty essentially to highlight Shell's crimes and keep a spotlight on this trial, and also push for an end to gas flaring. That is something that animated the resistance to Shell of Mossop and Ken back in the day, and it's still going on now.
Flaring.
Well, gas flaring is a practice that Shell would never get away with in the U.S. They would never get away with it in Europe, and they do it today in Nigeria 24 hours a day, and they've been doing it for decades. It's the burning off of associated gas that's released through oil extraction activities. And they do it because it's cheaper and easier than re-injecting the gas into the wells or actually capturing it and using it. It could be used to actually give electricity and power to some of these impoverished villages that have enriched Shell and the Nigerian government so much. But instead they burn it off in these toxic plumes of fire that release all kinds of toxins and enormous amounts of greenhouse gases that add to the climate crisis. And you know, it's something that aggravates local communities. It's poisonous to local communities, and you know, Shell has continued to choose to engage in this practice because it's more cost efficient than doing the right thing and finding a solution with its $30 billion in annual profits, and utilizing the gas, or at least re-injecting it.
Talk about how these are actually 3 cases, what's going to be happening tomorrow, Wednesday, in federal court here in New York, that have been consolidated into one, Hanshan.
Well, basically, you know, the first lawsuit was filed, as you mentioned, back in 1996, almost exactly a year to the day after the Ogoni 9 were hanged. And that was brought by Owens Wiwa, Ken Saro-Wiwa's brother, and Ken Wiwa, his son. But subsequently, there were other lawsuits as well. One against Brian Anderson, the head of Shell Nigeria at the time, as well as some lawsuits related to a few other incidents that are part of this trial. So, a shooting incident in which Shell requested the Nigerian military and later compensated them. They basically arrived at a nonviolent protest and shot and killed a man named Webari Nana. So the judge in this case, Chief Judge Kimball Wood, who's the chief judge here at the Southern District Second Circuit, has sort of just brought all these cases together to be heard in one trial because they're all absolutely interrelated and commingled. But the way that they've been consolidated, and you'd have to ask a lawyer to explain all the complexity of it, but you know, some charges could be dropped or thrown out or settled, and some could move forward. So it's all a matter of you know, what we'll see over the next month or so.
Steve Kressman, you've just come back from Britain. You were in London for the Shell shareholder meeting. How prominent was this case? And then explain overall what was happening at the Shell shareholder meeting.
Well, you know, perhaps not surprisingly, this case was not particularly prominent inside the shareholder meeting at all. The primary issue of concern inside the shareholder meeting was the remuneration package for the board of directors and the directors of the company in particular, which actually the shareholders interestingly revolted against, and you had a majority of Shell's shareholders voting against that package, which is a fairly unheard of thing to have happen. Shell's directors said that they will take it under advisement and come back and perhaps modify the raises that they're giving themselves, while of course they continue to gas flare in Nigeria. So, you know, it's the company is continuing on with business as usual and sort of keeping their head in the sand. You know, I think one of the things that will come out in this trial is you'll see that their strategy for many years, going back 20 years, has been to starve this issue of oxygen. That's literally a phrase that comes out of some of the documents that we've discovered in this trial. And, you know, and I think that they're still trying to do this. They're trying to not really give it any energy in hopes that it will simply go away. But those of us who knew Ken Saro-Wiwa, those of us who are deeply committed to peace and justice in Nigeria and corporate accountability are quite determined to not let this issue go away at all.
I wanted to play a brief clip of a film that we highlighted last week. It's Sandy Siafi's film called Sweet Crude. But this is the section of the documentary where she looks at the case of Ken Saro-Wiwa.
We want freedom! We want freedom! We want freedom! We want freedom! From today onwards, Shell is declared persona non grata in Ogoni.
The Ogoni struggle issued out of Ogonis like Ken Saro-Wiwa. They decided, you know, to come together to begin to agitate for an end to environmental degradation, for an end to the kind of injustice that exists in a situation where oil comes out of Ogoni land, but Ogoni people are some of the poorest people. Their lands are taken over for oil.
The Ogoni Bill of Rights was basically asking for a fair share of the oil revenue. And this was led peacefully, without violence. It was led peacefully, calling for dialogue.
We are going to demand our rights peacefully, non-violently, and we shall win.
This may come as a shock. Yesterday, when we decided to choose this man, we knew that his life was in danger. And quite frankly, we hoped that by focusing on his work, we would contribute urgently